There is a moment during the Holy Mass so sacred, so powerful, that heaven itself seems to stop and look down upon the earth. It lasts only a few seconds. The church falls silent, the priest lifts the consecrated host into the air, and in that mysterious instant, Jesus Christ offers himself once again for the salvation of souls. Yet most people never realize what is truly happening before their eyes. Some remain distracted, some look around the church, others are already thinking about what they will do after Mass. And while this happens, infinite grace is pouring down from heaven. Today, I want to take you into a profound spiritual reflection inspired by the teachings and revelations of Padre Pio, one of the greatest mystics in the history of the Church. A man who suffered with Christ, who saw the invisible realities of the Mass with his own spiritual eyes, and who understood the mystery of the Eucharist more deeply than most souls ever will. According to Padre Pio, the moment of the elevation during Mass is not simply another ritual. It is the very moment when heaven touches earth, when the sacrifice of Calvary becomes present again before humanity. But Padre Pio also warned that many believers unknowingly lose extraordinary graces during this sacred moment because they do not know how to pray, how to adore, or how to surrender themselves when Jesus is lifted before them. He revealed that there are prayers capable of opening the soul completely to God during the elevation, prayers that can transform not only your Mass experience, but your entire spiritual life. And what you are about to hear may completely change the way you attend Mass forever. If you truly believe Jesus is present in the Blessed Sacrament, write in the comments, "Jesus, I adore you in the Blessed Sacrament." Let this be your act of faith before we begin. Because once you understand what really happens when the host is elevated, you may never live another Mass the same way again. The moment the priest raises the sacred host above the altar is not just a symbolic gesture. It is not a pause in the liturgy or a simple religious tradition repeated for centuries. According to Padre Pio, this is the very moment when Calvary opens again before the eyes of humanity. In that brief instant, Jesus Christ, the Lamb sacrificed for the salvation of the world, offers himself completely to the Father once more. Heaven descends upon the altar, angels surround the sanctuary in adoration, and the door of mercy stands wide open for every soul willing to look up with faith. Yet this is also the exact moment when countless people become distracted. Some glance around the church without thinking. Others allow their minds to wander toward problems at home, financial worries, work stress, or plans for later in the day. Many have attended Mass for so many years that the elevation no longer shakes their hearts. They see the host lifted high, but they no longer truly see Jesus. And according to Padre Pio, this spiritual blindness is one of the greatest tragedies of modern Christianity. Padre Pio once said, "The world could survive more easily without the sun than without the Holy Mass." Think about the weight of those words. If the sun disappeared, the earth would fall into darkness and life would slowly die. But if the Holy Mass disappeared, souls themselves would begin to starve spiritually. The Mass is the heartbeat of the world, and the elevation is the summit of that miracle. It is the sacred instant when Christ silently waits for the love of his people. Padre Pio understood this reality in a way few human beings ever have. During Mass, witnesses often saw him weeping uncontrollably at the moment of consecration. Sometimes his face became pale, his body trembled, and tears streamed down his cheeks as though he were standing physically beneath the cross of Christ. For him, the Eucharist was never a symbol. Jesus was truly there, alive, looking at every soul with infinite love. And this is what many people fail to understand. When the host is elevated, God himself is gazing back at you. Imagine standing at the foot of Calvary on the day Christ was crucified. Imagine seeing his wounded body lifted upon the cross for the salvation of the world. Would you be distracted? Would you check the time? Would you allow your thoughts to drift elsewhere? Of course not. Yet according to Padre Pio, every elevation during Mass is spiritually connected to that same sacrifice. The saints understood this mystery deeply. Saint Francis of Assisi trembled before the Blessed Sacrament. Saint Thomas Aquinas would bow with profound reverence, overwhelmed by the presence of Christ. They knew that during the elevation, heaven and earth unite in a way the human mind can barely comprehend. Padre Pio warned that distraction during this sacred moment slowly weakens the soul. The more casually we approach the Eucharist, the colder our hearts become toward God. Over time, faith begins to lose its fire. Prayer becomes dry. Temptations grow stronger. Anxiety increases. Not because God abandons us, but because we stand before infinite grace without opening our hearts to receive it. He once described the consecration as a moment when thousands of angels fill the church in silent worship. While human beings struggle to pay attention, the angels fall prostrate before the King of Kings hidden beneath the appearance of bread. They see what most people cannot see. They understand the majesty of what is happening on the altar. And perhaps the most painful reality is this: Jesus remains there waiting, waiting for one sincere glance, waiting for one act of faith, waiting for one soul willing to whisper, "My Lord and my God." At the elevation, Christ does not force anyone to love him. He simply offers himself completely and waits for the response of the human heart. Padre Pio taught that during the elevation, the soul should move in three sacred directions at once. These were not complicated theological formulas or long prayers reserved for monks and priests. They were simple movements of the heart that any person could make in just a few seconds, yet according to him, they possessed the power to completely transform a soul's relationship with God. The first movement was deep adoration, the second was total self-offering, and the third was confident petition for grace. The first movement is adoration. Padre Pio said that when the priest lifts the host, the soul must immediately recognize who is truly present upon the altar. This is not ordinary bread. This is not a religious symbol created by human tradition. This is Jesus Christ himself, the King of Kings, hidden beneath the appearance of bread out of love for humanity. At that moment, the soul should fall spiritually to its knees before him, just as the angels do in heaven. Padre Pio often said that thousands of angels surround the altar during the consecration, prostrate in worship before the living God, while human beings remain distracted by temporary concerns. True adoration requires attention. It means fixing your eyes upon the elevated host and allowing your heart to become completely focused on Christ. For a few seconds, nothing else matters. Not your phone, not your schedule, not your worries, not the people around you. Only Jesus. Padre Pio himself became so absorbed in adoration during Mass that witnesses sometimes saw his face transform with emotion, as though he were seeing heaven open before him. He understood that adoration is not simply saying words. It is the soul recognizing the infinite majesty of God and responding with humility, silence, and love. The second movement is self-offering. Padre Pio taught that as Christ offers himself completely to the Father during the sacrifice of the Mass, every believer should also place their own life upon the altar spiritually. He encouraged souls to pray something simple but sincere. Jesus, I give myself completely to you. Let my life belong to you. These words may seem small, but they carry enormous spiritual meaning. To offer yourself means surrendering everything to Christ. Your plans, your fears, your family, your future, your wounds, your failures, your hidden struggles that no one else sees. Many people spend their entire lives trying to control everything around them, yet remain exhausted, anxious, and restless inside. Padre Pio believed the elevation was the perfect moment to release those burdens into the hands of Christ. One woman who followed his spiritual advice later shared that after months of offering her life to Jesus, during every elevation, she began experiencing a peace she had never known before. Her circumstances did not instantly change, but her heart changed. She no longer carried her suffering alone, because she had finally learned how to place it into the hands of God. The third movement is petition. Padre Pio strongly encouraged believers to ask God for graces during the elevation, because he believed this moment held extraordinary spiritual power. He said this was the time to pray for healing, conversion, protection, wisdom, strength, and mercy. Pray for your children. Pray for your marriage. Pray for freedom from fear and temptation. Pray for those who have abandoned God. Pray for the strength to carry your crosses with faith. But Padre Pio also warned against selfish prayer. He taught that every request should first seek the glory of God and the salvation of souls before personal comfort or material success. He often reminded people that God always answers sincere prayer, though not always in the way human beings expect. Sometimes the greatest miracle is not physical healing, but spiritual transformation. Sometimes the answer is not immediate rescue from suffering, but the grace to endure suffering with peace and trust in God. Padre Pio himself carried immense physical and spiritual pain throughout his life. Yet he remained filled with supernatural faith because he had surrendered everything to Christ. Padre Pio taught that every person should bring the deepest parts of their life to Jesus during the elevation. He believed this sacred moment was not meant only for priests, saints, or religious people living inside monasteries. It was meant for ordinary souls carrying ordinary struggles. Mothers worried about their children, fathers burdened by financial pressure, young people searching for direction, the sick, the lonely, the anxious, the brokenhearted. According to Padre Pio, when the host is elevated, every sorrow and every hope can be placed directly into the wounded heart of Christ. For parents, this moment becomes especially powerful. Padre Pio often encouraged mothers and fathers to spiritually place their children beneath the elevated host. He knew how deeply parents suffer when they see their sons or daughters drifting away from God, making destructive choices, or losing themselves in the darkness of the world. During the elevation, he advised parents to pray with complete trust. Jesus, I place my child into your sacred heart. Protect them, guide them, and bring them back to you. Many who followed this advice later testified that they witnessed unexpected changes within their families. Some saw children return to the faith after years of rebellion. Others experienced healing in relationships that once seemed impossible to repair. One father once shared a story that deeply moved those around him. For years, his daughter had completely abandoned her faith and fallen into a dangerous lifestyle that filled him with fear and heartbreak. Every Mass during the elevation, he silently offered her soul to Christ. He repeated the same prayer over and over with tears in his eyes, trusting that Jesus would not ignore a father's plea. After several years, something unexpected happened. His daughter suddenly asked him if she could go to Mass with him again. No argument had convinced her. No lecture had changed her heart. Yet slowly, through grace, her life began to transform. The father later said that he believed those countless prayers offered during the elevation became the bridge that brought his daughter back to God. Padre Pio also spoke often about suffering and illness. He knew physical pain intimately because he carried immense suffering throughout his own life. That is why he encouraged the sick to unite their wounds with the wounds of Christ during the elevation. He advised them to spiritually place their pain beneath the elevated host and allow Jesus to enter their suffering. Ask first for healing of the soul, he would say, and then for healing of the body if it serves your salvation. He reminded believers that while God does not always remove physical suffering immediately, he never ignores a soul that cries out to him with faith. For those facing financial hardship or uncertainty about the future, Padre Pio taught that the elevation is the perfect moment to surrender fear to God. Many people carry silent anxiety every day, terrified about bills, work, debts, and responsibilities they feel unable to handle. Yet Padre Pio reminded them that the same Christ who multiplied loaves and fishes still sees every human need. During the elevation, he encouraged believers to place their work, their finances, and their future into God's hands, trusting that heaven already knows what they need before they even ask. But he also warned people not to make material success the center of their prayers. Instead, he taught them to ask for wisdom, peace, and the grace to use whatever blessings they receive for the glory of God. Padre Pio warned that one of the greatest spiritual dangers is becoming too familiar with the Holy Mass. When people stop recognizing the greatness of the elevation, their hearts slowly grow cold toward God. They attend Mass physically, but spiritually they remain distant. According to him, ignoring the elevation is like standing at Calvary while turning your back on the cross. Heaven opens before the soul, yet many never look up. He often said that during the elevation, grace pours down upon the world like rain, but distracted souls leave empty because they never open their hearts to receive it. Over time, this spiritual carelessness weakens faith. Prayer becomes dry. Anxiety grows stronger. Temptations become harder to resist, not because God abandons the soul, but because the soul no longer approaches him with love and attention. Padre Pio compared the elevation to a treasure chest briefly opened by the King of Heaven. Imagine if a king allowed people to enter his treasury for only a few seconds each day. Everyone would rush there with focus and urgency. Yet during every Mass, Christ opens the treasures of divine grace, and many barely notice. He also taught that souls who truly live the elevation with faith begin to experience a deep interior peace that remains even during suffering. Their problems do not magically disappear, but their hearts become steadier because they learn to place everything into the hands of Christ. That is why Padre Pio begged believers never to let the elevation pass like an ordinary moment. For him, it was one of the most sacred opportunities heaven gives to humanity. Padre Pio believed that learning to focus during the elevation could completely transform a person's spiritual life. He encouraged believers to prepare themselves even before Mass begins. Instead of entering church distracted or rushed, he advised people to quietly remind themselves that they were about to stand before the living God. A simple interior decision such as, "Today I will truly focus on Jesus during the elevation," can already begin preparing the soul for grace. He also recommended keeping your eyes fixed on the altar as the consecration approaches. The elevation does not happen suddenly. The liturgy slowly leads toward that sacred moment, giving the soul time to become silent and attentive. Padre Pio taught that when the priest begins the words of consecration, believers should let go of unnecessary thoughts and prepare their hearts as if they were about to meet Christ face to face. Even small physical gestures can help the soul remain focused. Folding your hands carefully, lowering your head slightly, or silently bowing in adoration can help remove distractions and remind the heart of God's presence. Padre Pio himself often placed his wounded hands over his chest during the elevation, expressing complete surrender to Christ. If this message touched your heart, make sure to like this video, share it with someone who needs spiritual encouragement, and subscribe to continue discovering the powerful teachings of the saints. May Jesus bless you, protect your family, and draw your soul closer to Him every time you stand before the Holy Eucharist. Until next time, keep your eyes fixed on Christ.